You're not their father, Adam. Those 5 words hit me like a freight train, and I could barely process them as they left her mouth. Stephanie stood there, arms crossed, her lips curling into something that was halfway between defiance and indifference. There wasn't a shred of remorse in her eyes. Instead, she looked almost bored. As if this confession was just another item on her to-do list for the day. I didn't even know how we got here. 10 minutes ago, I had walked into the kitchen, clutching the DNA test results, my hands trembling. Stephanie, I had said, trying to keep my voice steady, why do Jake and Lily have Mexican heritage in their DNA? Neither of us is Mexican. Her response had been casual, almost flippant. Maybe it's a mistake, she said, flipping through her phone like we were talking about something as mundane as a grocery list. But I wasn't buying it. My gut churned, a storm brewing beneath the surface. Stephanie, I pressed, my voice harder now. This isn't a lab error. Whose DNA is in my kids? That's when she dropped the bomb. And just like that, the room tilted. My perfect life, the one I had built brick by brick, crumbled in an instant. My ears were ringing, my thoughts racing. Was this some sick joke? A nightmare I was seconds away from waking up from? Excuse me? I finally managed to say, though my voice didn't sound like my own. My throat was tight, my chest heavy. You heard me, she said, her voice sharp and dismissive. You're not their father. Well, not biologically anyway. Then, as if sensing my impending explosion, she added with a shrug, it's not like you didn't raise them. My legs nearly gave out beneath me, but I gripped the kitchen counter for support. Everything around me blurred, except for her face. I searched for guilt, for regret, for anything that showed she cared. Instead, she was scrolling through her phone again, as if this revelation was nothing but a passing inconvenience. And just like that, the dam broke. Who? I demanded, slamming the counter so hard the sound echoed through the kitchen. Who's the father? She finally looked up, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Oh, don't act so shocked, Adam. You've met him plenty of times. My boss, Eric. Who else? Eric. Her boss. The man I had shaken hands with at countless work parties. The man I had trusted to watch my kids during last year's charity event. The man who had been sitting at my dinner table, laughing with my family, all while stabbing me in the back. 15 years, she continued, as if she was giving me an update on her day. It's been going on for 15 years. You were always too busy with work to notice anyway, so don't act like a victim now. 15 years. Longer than Jake had been alive. My mind raced back to every missed sign, every late night at the office she had excused as work obligations, every moment I had trusted her without question. You're a monster, I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. But she just rolled her eyes. Spare me the theatrics, Adam, she said, brushing past me to pour herself a glass of wine. You weren't exactly perfect, either. What are you talking about? I shot back. I've done everything for you, for this family. I worked late to provide for us, Exactly, she interrupted, her tone ice cold. You were always working. Always tired. Always distracted. What did you think was going to happen, Adam? That I'd just sit around and wait for you to pay attention to me? Eric actually made me feel alive. Her words were like knives, each one stabbing deeper into the wreckage of my heart. But what made it worse, what truly broke me, was the fact that she didn't even seem sorry. And just like that, I knew this wasn't a nightmare. It was my new reality. One I'd have to face head-on. The house felt quieter than ever. That unbearable silence, broken only by the faint hum of the fridge, stretched out as if the world itself had paused to watch my life implode. Stephanie stood across from me, sipping her wine like this was some routine disagreement over bills or where to go on vacation. But it wasn't routine, it was a storm, and I was drowning. 15 years? I finally said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. You've been sleeping with him for 15 years, and you never thought to tell me? She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that sent a fresh wave of anger surging through me. Oh, please, Adam. Don't act like you're some saint. You were married to your job, not me. Eric just filled in the gaps. The audacity of her words made my fists clench. My job? My late nights at work? That's how she justified 15 years of betrayal? I stared at her, trying to find the woman I married, the woman I had built a life with. But all I saw now was a stranger, a cold, heartless stranger. Does he know? I asked, my voice hoarse. Does Eric know Jake and Lily are his kids? Stephanie's eyes flickered for just a moment, hesitation, maybe guilt, before she answered. Of course he does. He's not an idiot. Unlike you. That broke something in me. Not just anger, but something deeper, a sense of humiliation that burned hotter than any rage. Eric had known. All this time, the man I had trusted, who had been in my home, who my kids called Uncle Eric, had known he was their biological father. And he had been laughing behind my back, alongside the woman I thought I could trust with my life. Did my family know? I asked suddenly, my voice sharper than I intended. Stephanie froze for a second, and that hesitation was all the answer I needed. My stomach churned as I realized the extent of the betrayal. My parents, my siblings, had they known? Had they been smiling at Eric at family barbecues, knowing he was stealing my life out from under me? She took another sip of wine, clearly deciding that honesty, cruel as it was her best play now. Your sister might have guessed, she admitted casually. She said a few things over the years, but honestly, Adam, no one wanted to hurt your feelings. It wasn't their place. Their place? Their place? The absurdity of her reasoning made me laugh, bitter, hollow laughter that sounded foreign even to me. So, everyone just let me play the fool, huh? You, Eric, even my own family. You all let me think I had this perfect life, when really I was just some pawn in your little game. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she snapped, her tone laced with irritation. You think you're the first man this has happened to? Get over yourself. You're acting like a victim. Her words hit me like a slap, and for a moment, I couldn't even respond. Was she serious? Did she genuinely not understand the gravity of what she had done, or worse, did she simply not care? The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, was standing there, dismantling my life piece by piece, and she wanted me to get over it? I sacrificed everything for this family, I said through gritted teeth, the anger bubbling up again. I worked my ass off so you and the kids could have everything you ever wanted. And this is how you repay me? Stephanie rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it made my blood boil. Oh, spare me the martyr act, Adam. You think providing money was enough? You think that made you a good husband? You were never here, never present. You wanted to be the hero, but you forgot that heroes actually show up. Her words stung, not because they were true, but because she had twisted my efforts into some kind of failure. I wanted to scream, to argue, to make her see how absurd her justifications were. But I knew it was pointless. Stephanie wasn't looking for forgiveness or understanding. She had made up her mind long before this moment. Did you ever love me? I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I hated how vulnerable I sounded, but I needed to know. I needed some small shred of truth in the midst of all these lies. Stephanie hesitated, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, regret, maybe even sadness. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold indifference. I loved the idea of you, she said finally. You were safe. Stable. But Eric gave me passion. There it was. The final nail in the coffin. The truth, raw and brutal, laid bare before me. I wasn't the love of her life, I was a placeholder, a safety net she could fall back on while she chased her real desires elsewhere. I turned away, unable to look at her anymore. The woman I had once adored, who I had vowed to spend my life with, was gone. Or maybe she had never been there to begin with. Maybe I had spent the last 15 years loving a version of her that only existed in my mind. The sound of her phone buzzing pulled me out of my thoughts. She glanced at the screen, her face lighting up in a way that made my stomach turn. "It's Eric," she said, as if that wasn't the most insulting thing she could have said in that moment. "I need to take this." And just like that, she walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the shattered pieces of my life. I stood there, numb, staring at the DNA results still sitting on the counter. 15 years. 15 years of lies, of betrayal, of playing the fool. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Stephanie might have thought she had won, that she could walk away unscathed. But she had underestimated me. And if there was one thing I knew for certain, it was this: I wasn't going to let her destroy me. The next day, I woke up in the guest room, though I barely remembered going to bed. My head was pounding from the restless night of endless spiraling thoughts. Stephanie's casual betrayal played on loop in my mind, her words cutting deeper every time I thought about them. "You're not their father, Adam," and "get over yourself." Each word felt like a stone, crushing me further under its weight. But this time, I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. The anger bubbling inside me needed an outlet, and I wasn't about to play the meek fool any longer. It was time for a confrontation she wouldn't expect. When I walked downstairs, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. There she was, sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone with the same carefree demeanor she'd had the night before. It was as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just destroyed our family with a single confession. "Good morning," she said without looking up, her tone almost chirpy. The audacity of it made me laugh, a dry, humorless sound that caught her attention. She glanced at me then, her brows furrowing. "What's so funny?" I walked to the counter, grabbed the DNA test results, and slapped them down in front of her. This is funny, Stephanie. The fact that you think you can just blow up our lives and then act like everything is fine." Her expression soured. "Oh, Adam, are we really doing this again? I thought you'd at least have the sense to sleep on it and calm down." "Calm down?" I barked, my voice rising. "You've been cheating on me for 15 years, Stephanie. You've lied to me about our kids. You've humiliated me in ways I can't even begin to describe. And you want me to calm down?" She rolled her eyes, the dismissiveness in her body language igniting my fury even more. "Yes, calm down," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're acting like a child. I told you the truth, didn't I? You wanted answers, and I gave them to you. What more do you want?" "I want to know why," I said, slamming my hands on the counter. "Why did you do this to me? To us? Was I really that terrible of a husband?" She sighed dramatically, as if my questions were an inconvenience to her. "It's not about you, Adam. It's about me. I wanted more. Eric gave me more. You were always so predictable. So focused on being the perfect provider that you forgot how to actually be a husband." The way she twisted everything back onto me made my blood boil. "Don't you dare blame me for your choices, Stephanie. I worked hard for this family, for you, for Jake, for Lily. I sacrificed so much so you wouldn't have to. And this is how you repay me? Spare me the sob story," she snapped, standing up and crossing her arms. "You act like you're some kind of martyr, Adam, but you were never really here. Eric was there for me when you weren't. He made me feel alive. Her words hit me like a slap. And what about the kids? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Did you even think about what this would do to them? Do you have any idea how much this will destroy their lives? They're fine, she said with a shrug, as if we were discussing a minor inconvenience. They love Eric. They'll adjust. Kids are resilient. Her indifference toward our children, the ones I had spent over a decade raising, loving, and protecting, was the final straw. You're unbelievable, I said, shaking my head. You don't care about anyone but yourself, do you? Not me, not the kids, not even Eric. This is all about you. Oh, please, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Don't act like you're some noble hero, Adam. You stayed late at the office every night because it was easier than dealing with me and the kids. Don't pretend this is some grand betrayal when you checked out of this marriage years ago. Her words stung, but I knew they were just a deflection. She was trying to turn the blame on me, to justify her actions. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice cold. You've ruined this family, Stephanie. But I'm not going to let you drag me down with you. She raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. And what are you going to do about it, Adam? Run off and cry to your lawyer? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll fight for custody of Jake and Lily. Maybe I'll make sure you and Eric pay for what you've done. But one thing's for sure, I'm not staying here and letting you walk all over me anymore. Stephanie laughed, a cold, mocking sound that made my skin crawl. Good luck with that. You don't have a leg to stand on, Adam. You're not even their biological father. Her words hung in the air, cutting deeper than anything she'd said before. But instead of breaking me, they fueled the fire inside me. She thought she had all the power, that I would crumble under the weight of her betrayal. But she was wrong. I leaned in, my voice low and steady. You've underestimated me, Stephanie. You've taken everything from me, my trust, my family, my life. But I promise you, you're going to regret every single choice you've made. Her smirk faltered for just a moment, and I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. It was small, but it was enough. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. And I wasn't going to stop until I had taken back everything she had stolen from me. After that confrontation, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to be her punching bag anymore. Stephanie might have thought she held all the cards, but she underestimated just how resourceful I could be when pushed to the edge. For 15 years, I had played the dutiful husband, the provider, the rock of this family. But now? Now, I was a man with nothing to lose. I spent the rest of the day locked in my office. At first, I just stared at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't even recognize. She had torn apart everything we built together, and for what? Some cheap thrill? Some fantasy of passion with her boss? I pulled up her emails, combing through years of correspondence between her and Eric. I hadn't cared before, I trusted her. But now, every innocent email took on a darker tone. I found the hidden folder in her account quickly, the one she clearly thought I'd never look for. It was there, buried among years of business emails and PTO requests. The messages between her and Eric made my stomach churn. They didn't even bother to hide their affair, it was all there in black and white. Late-night rendezvous at cheap motels. Texts mocking me for being clueless. Photos, some explicit, some just them smiling together like the happy couple they'd made themselves out to be. But the worst part? The way they talked about Jake and Lily. Our little family, Eric had written in one email, attached to a photo of him with the kids at some park. Our kids. As if I had never mattered. As if I was just the babysitter keeping their secret while they played house behind my back. My hands shook as I scrolled through the emails. The humiliation, the rage, the betrayal, it all boiled over inside me. But instead of exploding, I channeled that energy into something far more productive. If Stephanie and Eric thought I was going to roll over and accept this, they were about to get the shock of their lives. I called my lawyer, Karen. She wasn't just any lawyer, she was ruthless, the kind of woman who could tear a case apart without breaking a sweat. I told her everything, laying out the details of the affair, the DNA test results, the emails. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer meaningless platitudes. When I finished, she said one thing: "You're in a better position than you think." Her words were a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the storm. "But they're not even biologically mine," I said, my voice heavy. "Doesn't that mean I don't have any rights?" "Not necessarily," Karen replied. "You've raised those kids. You've been their father in every way that matters. Family courts care about stability and the best interests of the children, not just biology. And if we play our cards right, we can make sure Stephanie doesn't walk away from this unscathed." I nodded, gripping the phone tightly. "I want full custody," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I don't want her near Jake and Lily. She doesn't deserve them." Karen's voice was calm, measured. "Let's start by gathering everything we can. Evidence of the affair, anything that shows she's an unfit parent. You've already got a strong case with the DNA test and the emails. Now we just need to build the narrative." The narrative. That word stuck with me. Stephanie and Eric had been writing their own story for years, painting me as the oblivious husband while they lived out their fantasy. Well, it was my turn to take control of the story. That night, I moved quietly. While Stephanie slept in our bedroom, oblivious to my plans, I dug through every corner of the house. Bank statements, receipts, her laptop, anything that could strengthen my case. I found more than I expected. Payments to hotels, gifts she had bought for Eric with our joint account. She didn't even try to hide it. But the real jackpot was her journal. She had always kept one, though I never cared enough to look before. But now? Now I needed every piece of ammunition I could find. I skimmed through the entries, my stomach turning with every page. She wrote about Eric like he was her soulmate, the love of her life. But there were also entries about me, mocking me, belittling me, calling me boring and clueless. The journal also revealed something far more sinister. Eric had been pushing her to leave me for years, but she had refused. Not because she loved me, oh no, but because she didn't want to lose the stability I provided. She needed me to keep the facade going, to pay the bills, to give her the appearance of a perfect life. It was all so calculated, so heartless. Stephanie wasn't just unfaithful, she was a manipulator, someone who used me as a means to an end. And Eric? He was just as complicit, a smug coward hiding behind his title as her boss. By the time I finished, the rage inside me had transformed into something colder, sharper. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. For me, for Jake and Lily, for the life they had stolen from me. When Stephanie woke up the next morning, I was already gone. I left a note on the counter, short and to the point: "I'm taking a few days to think. Don't contact me." In reality, I wasn't just thinking, I was planning. I had copies of all the evidence, and I wasn't going to wait for Stephanie to strike first. I booked a meeting with Karen and laid everything out. The emails, the journal, the DNA results, it was all there, a damning case against her. Karen's eyes lit up as she flipped through the documents. "This is good," she said. "Really good. If we play this right, we can get you everything you're asking for." And that's when the idea hit me: the ultimate revenge. It wasn't enough to expose the affair or take the kids. I needed to disappear from Stephanie's life entirely. Let her feel the weight of her choices without me there as her safety net. But first, I had to set the trap. I didn't return home that night, or the night after. Instead, I stayed in a small, nondescript motel on the outskirts of town. The walls were thin, the bed uncomfortable, but I didn't care. This wasn't about comfort, it was about creating distance. Every hour I spent away from Stephanie was another hour she'd have to stew in her own thoughts, wondering what I was up to. I kept my phone off for the most part, except to coordinate with Karen. Every update from her was like another brick in the fortress I was building against Stephanie. "We'll file for custody this week," Karen told me during one of our calls. "But we'll need to document every interaction moving forward. Don't give her any ammunition." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "She'll get nothing from me. Trust me." But it wasn't enough to just play defense. Stephanie needed to feel the consequences of what she'd done, not just in court, but in every aspect of her carefully constructed life. And I knew exactly where to start: her precious relationship with Eric. I dug deeper into Eric's background, using every resource I could find. He wasn't as squeaky clean as he liked to appear. A quick search revealed that he was married, happily, according to his social media, and had 2 kids of his own. That was my first piece of leverage. The second came from his company. As her boss, Eric had violated several workplace policies by carrying on a relationship with Stephanie, especially one that spanned over a decade. This wasn't just an affair, it was a breach of corporate ethics, and I intended to use that to my advantage. With Karen's help, I drafted an anonymous letter to Eric's company. It was concise but damning, outlining the details of his affair with Stephanie and including copies of the emails I had uncovered. I didn't send it just yet, I wanted the timing to be perfect. But knowing that I held his career in my hands gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Next, I turned my attention to Stephanie. She still had no idea what I was planning, and I intended to keep it that way. I knew her well enough to predict how she'd react to my sudden absence. Sure enough, on the 3rd day, she began calling relentlessly. First, it was just a few texts: "Where are you? We need to talk." But when I didn't respond, the messages became more frantic. "You can't just leave like this, Adam," and, finally, "If you don't come back, I'll tell the kids everything." That last message made me laugh bitterly. The idea that she thought she could threaten me, that she could wield the truth as a weapon, was almost pathetic. She didn't know that I had already planned to tell Jake and Lily myself, in a way that wouldn't shatter their world the way she had shattered mine. On the 4th day, I decided it was time to throw her off balance. I called her from a burner phone, keeping my voice calm and measured. "Adam," she exclaimed, her tone a mix of relief and irritation. "Where the hell have you been?" "Taking some time," I said evenly. I needed to think. "Well, you've done enough thinking," she snapped. "You can't just walk out like that. You have responsibilities, Adam. To me. To the kids." The hypocrisy of her words was almost laughable. "You don't get to lecture me about responsibilities, Stephanie," I replied. "Not after what you've done." She let out an exasperated sigh. "Are you really going to hold this over my head forever? I told you the truth. I didn't have to, but I did. Doesn't that count for anything?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You told me the truth because you got caught. Don't act like this was some act of bravery." There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. But when she spoke again, her tone was cold, calculating. "What's your plan, Adam? Are you going to drag this out forever? Because if you think you can just waltz back in here and pretend everything's fine, you're delusional." "Oh, I'm not pretending everything's fine," I said, my voice low. "I'm not coming back, Stephanie. Not the way you think." Her silence told me I had struck a nerve. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "You'll find out soon enough," I said before hanging up. It wasn't much, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in her mind. Let her wonder. Let her squirm. Meanwhile, I focused on the next phase of my plan, securing my future with Jake and Lily. I scheduled a private meeting with them, away from Stephanie's influence. I picked them up from school under the guise of taking them out for lunch, something I'd done plenty of times before. They were excited at first, but as soon as we sat down, they could tell something was off. "Is everything okay, Dad?" Jake asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I took a deep breath, my heart heavy with what I was about to say. "I need to talk to you both about something important," I began. "It's about your mom and me." Their faces fell, the weight of my words sinking in. Lily looked like she was about to cry, and Jake's expression hardened, as if he was bracing himself for the worst. "I love you both more than anything," I continued, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "But your mom and we've been having some problems. And I found out some things recently that, well, they're going to change our family." Jake narrowed his eyes. "What things?" he asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. I hesitated, trying to find the right words. "It's complicated," I said finally. "But what you need to know is that none of this is your fault. Your mom and I just have some issues we need to work through." Lily burst into tears, and I pulled her into a hug, my heart breaking as she sobbed against my chest. Jake, on the other hand, looked angry, like he wanted to punch a wall. "So, what happens now?" he asked, his voice tight. "I'm not leaving you," I assured them. "That's the most important thing. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." It wasn't the full truth, but it was enough for now. They didn't need to know about Eric or the DNA tests, not yet. For now, all that mattered was reassuring them that I wasn't going anywhere. As I drove them back to Stephanie's house, my resolve hardened. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about protecting my kids from the fallout of her selfishness. And I would do whatever it took to make sure they were safe. After dropping the kids off, I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house that once felt like my sanctuary. Now, it felt like enemy territory, a place filled with lies, betrayal, and memories that cut deeper than any wound. I watched as Jake and Lily went inside, their faces still etched with confusion and worry. It killed me to leave them in there with her, but I reminded myself this was temporary. They wouldn't be in her grip for much longer. Stephanie didn't bother to come outside, and I was glad. I wasn't in the mood for another argument. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. It was Karen. "How did the talk with the kids go?" she asked when I picked up. "It was rough," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "I didn't tell them everything, just enough to prepare them for what's coming." "That's smart," Karen said. "We'll ease them into the rest when the time is right. For now, I've filed the paperwork for custody. With the evidence we have, the judge will see that you're the more stable parent. And if Stephanie's affair comes out in court, which it will, that'll only strengthen your case." The thought of a courtroom battle made my stomach churn, but I knew it was necessary. "What about Eric?" I asked. "Have we moved on him yet?" Karen chuckled lightly, the sound almost sinister. "I sent the letter to his company this morning. Trust me, they won't take this lightly. An affair with a subordinate, especially one that's been going on for years, is a massive liability. He'll be lucky if they don't fire him on the spot." I couldn't suppress a grim smile. Eric had taken so much from me, but he was about to lose just as much. His perfect little world, the career he'd worked so hard to build, it was all going to come crashing down. And the best part? I wouldn't have to lift a finger. His own actions would destroy him. When I hung up with Karen, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting, I was acting. Stephanie and Eric thought they were untouchable, that they could manipulate me and get away with it. But they were wrong. This was only the beginning. The fallout started the next day. I got a call from an unfamiliar number while I was at the motel. When I picked up, a furious voice greeted me. "You son of a bitch." It was Eric. I leaned back in the creaky motel chair, a smirk tugging at my lips. "Eric," I said calmly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Don't play dumb," he snarled. "You sent that letter to my company. Do you have any idea what you've done? They've put me on administrative leave. My career, my reputation, it's all at risk because of you." I let the silence stretch out for a moment, savoring the panic in his voice. "I didn't do anything, Eric," I said finally. "You did this to yourself. Maybe you should have thought about the consequences before you decided to sleep with another man's wife." "You think this is funny?" he snapped. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're pathetic, Adam. You couldn't keep your wife happy, and now you're trying to blame me for your failures." That hit a nerve, but I didn't let it show. "I'm not blaming you for anything, Eric. I'm just making sure you face the consequences of your actions." "Oh, and by the way, does your wife know yet? Or are you planning to keep her in the dark, just like you did with me?" The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, he muttered, "You're a bastard," before hanging up. I set the phone down, feeling a wave of satisfaction wash over me. Eric was scrambling, and it was only a matter of time before his carefully curated life fell apart. But this was just the first domino. The next one was Stephanie. When I returned to the house that evening to pick up Jake and Lily for the weekend, Stephanie was waiting for me. Her arms were crossed, her expression icy. "What the hell are you doing, Adam?" she demanded as soon as I walked through the door. "I'm here to pick up the kids," I said evenly, ignoring her tone. "They're spending the weekend with me." "You know that's not what I mean," she snapped. "Eric called me. He said you're trying to ruin his life. Do you have any idea what kind of position you're putting me in?" I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "Oh, you mean the same kind of position you put me in when you decided to lie to me for 15 years? That kind of position?" Her face turned red, but she quickly recovered, her expression hardening. "You're being vindictive," she said. "This isn't going to solve anything. It's just going to make things worse for everyone, including Jake and Lily." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the kids wouldn't hear. "You don't get to lecture me about what's best for Jake and Lily," I said. "You've lied to them, manipulated them, and dragged them into your mess. I'm the only one fighting for what's best for them." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're the better parent? Fine. Let's see what a judge has to say about that." I smiled coldly. "Oh, we will. And when they see the emails, the hotel receipts, the journal entries, when they see the kind of person you really are, you'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation." Her face fell for just a moment, a flicker of fear breaking through her tough exterior. But she quickly masked it with anger. "You're not going to win, Adam," she said through gritted teeth. "You don't have the guts." I leaned in, my voice barely above a whisper. "You have no idea what I'm capable of, Stephanie. But you're about to find out." That weekend with Jake and Lily was the calm before the storm. We went to the park, had movie nights, and for a little while, everything felt normal. But I knew this was just the eye of the hurricane. When Monday rolled around, the real battle would begin. Stephanie thought she was untouchable, that she could control the narrative. But I wasn't the same man she had betrayed. I wasn't going to sit back and let her win. The game had changed, and I was holding all the cards now. Monday morning arrived, and with it, the first real cracks in Stephanie's armor. The call came earlier than expected. I was sitting in my car outside the courthouse, sipping bitter motel coffee while preparing to meet Karen, when my phone lit up with Stephanie's name. I hesitated for a moment before answering, steeling myself for whatever tirade she had prepared. "Adam," she began, her voice sharp but trembling ever so slightly, "what the hell have you done?" "What are you talking about, Stephanie?" I replied, feigning innocence, though my heart raced with satisfaction. "You know damn well what I'm talking about," she hissed. "Eric's wife found out. She showed up at his office this morning, screaming like a lunatic. Now the whole company knows. HR's investigating him, and he's blaming me for everything." I leaned back in my seat, letting her words wash over me like music. Eric's downfall had come even faster than I expected. "Well," I said, keeping my tone light, "it sounds like Eric's chickens are finally coming home to roost." "Don't you dare act smug about this," she snapped, her voice cracking under the strain. "You've ruined his career, Adam. He's talking about suing you for defamation." I laughed out loud at that, the sound filling the car. "Defamation? That's rich. Everything I shared was the truth, Stephanie. I didn't make him sleep with you, and I certainly didn't force him to flaunt it like some middle-aged Casanova." There was a pause, and I could practically hear her grinding her teeth on the other end. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she said bitterly. "You're turning this into some kind of sick game." "No," I said, my voice dropping. "This isn't a game, Stephanie. This is justice. You lied to me for 15 years. You took my trust, my family, my life, and treated it like a joke. You don't get to walk away from this unscathed." She let out a bitter laugh, but it was weaker this time, the bravado slipping. "You're pathetic, Adam. Do you really think any of this changes the fact that you were never enough? That's why I went to Eric in the first place, because you were boring and predictable, and he wasn't." Her words stung, but they didn't break me. Not anymore. I was past the point of letting her venom seep into my soul. "If I was so boring," I shot back, "why did you stay with me for 15 years? "Oh, that's right, because I paid the bills, raised the kids, and gave you a life of comfort while you played your little games." There was another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost desperate. "What happens now, Adam? You're really going to take this to court? You're going to drag Jake and Lily through this mess?" That was the opening I'd been waiting for. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going to drag them through anything. I'm going to protect them, from you and from Eric. They deserve stability, and I'm going to make sure they have it." "And you think you're the stable one?" she shot back, her voice rising again. "You've been staying in some seedy motel, plotting revenge like a lunatic. Do you really think a judge is going to give you custody?" "You'd be surprised," I said coldly. "Karen's already filed the papers. And once the court sees the evidence, the DNA results, the emails, the journal entries, they'll understand exactly who you are." Her silence this time was deafening. She had nothing left to say, no witty comeback or venomous jab. For the first time, Stephanie realized she was losing control. By the time we entered the courthouse later that day, my confidence had only grown. Karen met me in the lobby, her sharp suit and calm demeanor radiating power. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, handing me a stack of neatly organized documents. "More than ready," I said. Stephanie arrived a few minutes later, looking frazzled. Her usual air of superiority was gone, replaced by something closer to panic. Eric wasn't with her, and I wasn't surprised. He was likely too busy trying to salvage his own crumbling life to bother showing up for hers. As the hearing began, Karen wasted no time painting a vivid picture of Stephanie's betrayal. She presented the DNA results, the emails, and even excerpts from Stephanie's journal. Every piece of evidence chipped away at the image Stephanie had tried to maintain, that of a loving mother and devoted wife. Stephanie's lawyer attempted to fight back, but it was a losing battle. The evidence was overwhelming, and Stephanie's demeanor only made things worse. She interrupted repeatedly, her frustration boiling over into angry outbursts that only reinforced Karen's portrayal of her as reckless and unstable. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I told the court about my love for Jake and Lily, how I had raised them as my own despite Stephanie's lies. I spoke about the sacrifices I'd made for our family, the betrayal I'd uncovered, and my determination to provide a stable, loving home for my children. By the time I finished, there wasn't a doubt in my mind that the judge saw the truth. That evening, I returned to the motel, exhausted but victorious. The court hadn't made a final ruling yet, but Karen assured me we were in a strong position. Stephanie, on the other hand, was unraveling. Her texts had gone from angry to desperate, alternating between threats and pleas. "You're destroying our family," one read. "Can't we just work this out?" But it was too late for that. There was no family left to save, no relationship to mend. Stephanie had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the darkening sky. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. The battle wasn't over yet, but I was no longer the man I'd been when this started. I was stronger, sharper, and ready to see this through to the end. Stephanie thought she could break me, but she was wrong. I wasn't just surviving, I was taking back my life, one piece at a time. The day of reckoning came sooner than I expected. Stephanie, no longer the confident, manipulative woman I had once known, had descended into chaos. Her texts and calls had become a storm of contradictions, one moment begging me to fix this for the sake of the kids, the next hurling insults and threats about how she would destroy me in court. But I knew her well enough to recognize desperation when I saw it. Stephanie was grasping at straws, and I had every intention of pulling them out from under her one by one. The court date for the custody hearing arrived on a chilly morning. The air felt charged, as though even the weather knew the significance of what was about to unfold. I arrived at the courthouse with Karen, who looked calm and confident as always. "This is it," she said as we walked toward the doors. "We've done the work. Now it's time to let the evidence speak for itself." Inside, Stephanie sat with her lawyer. She looked haggard, her once pristine appearance now frayed around the edges. Gone was the woman who used to command a room with her confidence and charm. In her place was someone who had clearly been up all night, fighting a losing battle against the storm she had created. Eric wasn't there. According to Karen, his world had imploded after the anonymous letter to his company. He had been fired for misconduct, and his wife had filed for divorce the same week. Apparently, he was now too preoccupied with his own legal battles to bother showing up for Stephanie. It was poetic, really, the man she had risked everything for had abandoned her at the moment she needed him most. The hearing began, and the judge wasted no time diving into the heart of the matter. Karen opened with a powerful argument, laying out the facts of Stephanie's betrayal and its impact on the family. She painted a vivid picture of a woman who had prioritized her own selfish desires over her responsibilities as a wife and mother. Then came the evidence. Karen presented the DNA results first, the undeniable proof that Jake and Lily were not my biological children. The courtroom was silent as the results were read aloud, the weight of the revelation sinking into every corner of the room. Stephanie's lawyer tried to counter by arguing that biology didn't define parenthood, that I had willingly raised Jake and Lily as my own and couldn't now use their parentage against her. But Karen was ready. "While it's true that my client has been a loving and devoted father," she said, her voice steady and commanding, "it's also true that Ms. Reynolds deliberately deceived him for over a decade. This is not a question of biology, it's a question of trust, stability, and the children's best interests." Next came the emails. The judge read through the excerpts Karen had carefully selected, highlighting not just the affair but the cruelty of the deception. Emails mocking me, calling me clueless. Messages between Stephanie and Eric discussing how to keep their relationship hidden. One email, in particular, stood out, a message from Eric to Stephanie calling Jake and Lily our kids, followed by a plan to eventually phase me out of their lives. I watched Stephanie's face as the emails were read. Her confident facade crumbled with each word. She kept glancing at her lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. By the time Karen presented the journal entries, Stephanie was visibly shaking. But the most damning piece of evidence came at the end. Karen revealed a financial trail, hotel receipts, expensive gifts, and unexplained withdrawals from our joint account, all pointing to the fact that Stephanie had not only betrayed me emotionally but had also siphoned money from our family to fund her affair. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and faced the judge, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Your Honor," I began, "I didn't come here today to seek revenge. I came here to protect my children. Jake and Lily may not be my biological children, but they are my world. I've raised them, loved them, and sacrificed everything for them. And I'm here today because I want to give them the stability and security they deserve." I paused, glancing at Stephanie, who refused to meet my eyes. "Their mother," I continued, "has shown a pattern of dishonesty and recklessness. She's put her own needs above those of her family, and now my children are suffering because of it. I'm asking for full custody not out of spite, but out of love. They deserve better." The judge nodded, his expression unreadable, and asked Stephanie if she wanted to respond. She stood, her hands trembling as she gripped the podium. I made mistakes," she stammered, her voice unsteady. "But I love my kids. I've always loved them. And I don't think it's fair to take them away from me because of mistakes I made in my marriage." Her words were hollow, her voice lacking the conviction she once wielded so effortlessly. The judge listened, but it was clear her pleas weren't enough to undo the mountain of evidence against her. When the decision came later that afternoon, it was as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of Jake and Lily. Stephanie was given visitation rights, but only under supervision. The court acknowledged my role as their father in every way that mattered, regardless of biology. Stephanie's reaction was as dramatic as I expected. She stormed out of the courtroom, muttering curses under her breath, her lawyer trailing behind her. I didn't follow. There was nothing left to say. As I left the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of closure. This wasn't the ending I had envisioned when I married Stephanie, but it was the one I needed. She had taken so much from me, but she couldn't take Jake and Lily. They were my family, and now they were safe. That night, I sat with Jake and Lily in our new apartment, a modest but comfortable place far from the house we had once shared with Stephanie. As we ate dinner together, laughing over silly jokes and talking about their day at school, I realized something: this was my fresh start. My chance to rebuild, to give my kids a life free from lies and manipulation. Stephanie's betrayal had shattered my world, but it hadn't destroyed me. In the end, I had found strength in the wreckage, and I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving.